Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravaticharya Osatara Satashi Shimad. His Divine Grace Sabaya Chananada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananda Goti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gaur Bhagavata Sayam Kun Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Vajaradam Ki Jai, Jagadada Swami Ki Jai, Yamunamai Ki Jai, Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai, Sampeda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Ganat Timidandasha Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Miritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances Under the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So this afternoon we're going to speak about a very instructive story from the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Vedic literatures are full of very instructive stories, things that happened and also things we can learn from things that happened. And this is a story that happened many, many, many years ago. And we're not going to start talking about Citraketu. We're going to start talking about a preliminary story that occurred right before the story of Citraketu. So this is from the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. If anyone's interested in hearing or reading these stories, you can get a set of the Srimad Bhagavatams. And in this way, read these fantastic stories about philosophy, about dealings in this material world, about the nature of this world, about detachment from this world, about yoga, and all sorts of interesting topics, as well as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the story of Citraketu starts, interestingly enough, in the kingdom of Indra. Let me explain who Indra is. Indra is one of the assistants of God. These are called, for those of you from India, you're familiar with the term demigods, or sometimes if you're from India, you call them the gods. I'm sure you've heard that before. They are not God, they are assisting God. Just like we are here also, we're trying to assist God, because I don't say that I'm a demigod, but there are... Being humble, I would say something else, but these are on different planets. There's different living entities composed of different substances on different planets. It's not that every living entity is carbon-based on every planet. There are different life forms that are based on other elements or subtler elements like earth, water, fire, or ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. So, be that as it may, there are these living entities on higher planets, and these demigods, living entities, higher planets, they have gurus, just like we have on this planet, like my guru Srila Prabhupada, and the demigod's guru is named Brahaspati, and the head of the demigods is named Indra. So, once upon a time, of course in the higher planets, let's just go back a little bit, higher planets there's a lot of enjoyment. It doesn't get cold in the winter, like we're experiencing now. It doesn't get hot in the summer. It doesn't rain too much. No hospitals. Pretty nice place. Mangoes are as big as this building, without any seeds, without any skin, and you got rivers of mango juice. Pretty nice. Who wants to go there? Raise your hand. I don't. There's a problem, because when you go there, you get enamored by different aspects of the material energy, because it's so nice. Give you a practical example in this world. There's this island in the Pacific called Hawaii, where the weather is always good. Srila Prabhupada, my spiritual master, stated that if there's any nice place in the material world, it's Hawaii. And Mother Krishna Priya's been there. I've been there. But the problem is, it is so nice that when you try to get people engaged in spiritual life, they say, no time. Surf's up. You know what surf is? Surf. So I had that experience. I was trying to give a class in the morning, Bhagavatam class, and I said, where are all the devotees? They said, surf's up. So that's the problem. So you get enamored and you forget about, the real purpose of life, which is self-realization. Because everything's temporary in this world. So the real purpose of life is to try to find out where you're going, where you came from, what the whole purpose of everything is about. Not just to eat for the sake of living or live for the sake of eating, whatever. So what happened with this head of all these powerful entities, Indra, he got really enamored. He also had a nice wife, a very attractive wife, and also had dancing girls too. And he was with his wife, seated on the throne, and his guru walks in. This is a picture depicts the whole thing. I don't know if you can see it too clearly. His guru is on the right-hand side there. His name is Brahaspati. He walks in, and he doesn't even see his guru. He just sees his wife and everybody worshiping him, and he thinks, you know, I'm really cool. And what happens is the guru gets upset, walks out, and the problem with ignoring your guru and not listening to your guru is that you sort of lose everything materially and spiritually, and you're in trouble. And that's really what happened. He even lost his position. At that time, the demigods became very, very much powerless because they weren't empowered by their spiritual master anymore. And the demons, who were empowered by they also had a spiritual master. Let's talk about this in terms of like Star Wars, in case you've heard about this. The dark side of the Force, the light side of the Force. Okay. So they have a spiritual master, Shukracharya. Shukracharya means one who's really concerned with his own family, and you know, he's not impartial. He has all sorts of conflicts of interest. Sounds familiar, like the U.S. government. Anyway, so he has all sorts of conflicts of interest, but he was being worshipped by the dark side of the Force, what we call demons. Not that they had fangs or anything like that. So he was being worshipped, and they became very powerful, and they were able to overcome these demigods. And that was a problem. And it was a problem because we don't want the dark side of the Force in charge of the universe. It's a big problem. And this also shows that one has to be careful about attachment to any sort of opulences that one has. There's an interesting verse in the Bhagavatam, too, spoken by Queen Kunti, which says, Janmaishvarya Shutasha Shibir Edam Adapavan, that if one's attached to his wealth, his beauty, his power, his birth, his learning, it bewilders one, and one forgets about what life is all about. You know, the example Srila Prabhupada gave sometimes is that we're in an apartment. The apartment is called this body. We have a lease. The lease is running out. It does run out. I hate to tell you that at some particular time. And if you're not looking for another apartment, or, you know, where are you going to go after you have to leave the apartment, that's stupid. To use the nomenclature, common nomenclature, you'll be living on the street. Not very intelligent. So you should try to find out what's happening. And you forget about things when everything's going well. You forget about these things. So sometimes it's actually a blessing when things don't go well. Yashaham anugranami harisheta tadamshana. Sometimes Krishna or God arranges it so you just go, Hare Krishna, or pray to him, whatever religion you happen to be in. Help, help. And when you pray for help, you're really attentive, right? And when everything's going well, oh, God, he's kind of a nice guy, you know. We'll go see him on Sunday. Or Saturday if you happen to be Jewish, you know, whatever. We're going to visit him once a week, you know, pay our dues, give our tithe, then we're all right. But really, we have to be crying out for help. So, the way that these demigods cry out for help, there's several different ways, but in this particular case, they went to, not the head of the administrative demigods, but the Brahman head of all the demigods. His name is Lord Brahma. And they went to Lord Brahma and they said, we're in trouble. What are we going to do? Lord Brahma was the first created person within this universe. Krishna, Lord Vishnu, created him, and he basically was the engineer who engineered everything else, and so, but he's like on top. So he told them, like in this particular case, I have a suggestion. There is a very nice Brahmin. His name is Visvarupa. And this is interesting for any of you. He has 3 heads. I mean, it's actually kind of nice to have more than one head. But what he used his heads for was quite interesting. One head was for drinking soma ras. The other head was for drinking wine. I guess he didn't follow the regular principles. And the other head was just for eating prasad. So if you have 3 heads, you can get away with it. So Visvarup, he can teach you a specific mantra to actually make you invulnerable, powerful. And that's just called the Narayana Kavach, or Kavacha in Sanskrit. Hindi it's Kavach, but in Sanskrit it's Kavacha. You have the A at the end. So Narayana Kavacha mantra. And so by chanting this mantra, you just protect all parts of your body. And this mantra is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam. If you want to get a copy of the Srimad Bhagavatam, get it, and you can protect your whole body in this way. And you say this mantra, touching different parts of the body as you're saying the mantra. There's also other kavachas, like Nrsimha Kavacha and other mantras too. So he said, you got to go to Visvarup and get this mantra from him. Visvarup has a little problem though, because he also likes the dark side of the force because his family's connected with them on his mother's side. Father's side, connected with the demigods. Mother's side, he's connected with the demons. So you have to tolerate this. So what happened is that Indra, he got this mantra, and here you see him getting the mantra from the 3-headed person, Visvarup. And the mantra consists of different names and glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and touching different parts of your body. Now, Visvarup, as I said before, had a little bit of a conflict of interest. He actually was offering oblations after he gave Indra this mantra to the demigods, which was good, but he also offered oblations to the dark side of the force. Because it was conflicted. Like if your mother, everybody loves their mother, don't they? So even if your mother happens to be Darth Vader or something like that, you still have some affection for her. Darth Vaderini. Anyway, you still have some affection for her. So he was offering oblations, and Indra couldn't stand it. So Indra, he decided to cut off the head of his guru. 3 heads of the guru. Not very happy with his guru, or not appreciative, properly appreciative. Don't do that. Not a good idea. So he cut off the heads of his guru, temporary guru. Actually, he accepted this guru not because of any devotion, but for the purpose of getting the Narayana Kavacha mantra. So after he cut off the head of the guru, he got sinful reactions. Obviously, you kill your guru, bad karma. And so at this particular juncture, he was able to distribute sinful reactions to other living entities that are described. Like he was able to distribute one aspect of the sinful activity or sinful reaction to water, because water has bubbles, and bubbles sometimes indicate impurities. And water also can increase the volume of anything. So there's a positive and a negative. So we're not going to go through, he distributed it to some ladies, to water, to trees, and the earth. It's his sinful activities or sinful reaction. And so he had another problem too, because this Visvarup, he had a father, as most people do, and his father's name was Twasta. Here's his father right here. I took that photo with my phone. So his father's name was Twasta, and Twasta was upset that his son had been killed by Indra. So he thought, I want to create a demon that can kill Indra. He was so upset. So he performed this sacrifice, as you see here, and out of the sacrifice came this demon. Wow, big demon. And so Vritrasura was his name. Vritrasura. And the mantra that was pronounced was to create a demon that was the enemy of Indra. And actually, he pronounced it improperly, so of whom Indra is the enemy. Anyway, so both things came out. So this big demon came out, and he challenged Indra and the demigods, and he defeated the demigods and Indra, and basically swallowed up some of the demigods. Indra was really upset. You know, it really could ruin your day when something like this happens. So then, Indra, naturally, at this point, went to Lord Vishnu. When everything goes wrong, just go to the Lord. And he prayed, Lord Vishnu, help me, help me. And Lord Vishnu told him that there's only one thing you can do to defeat this demon. And that is you have to get a thunderbolt that's better than your ordinary thunderbolt, because Indra's in charge of the thunder and lightning and clouds. And the only type of thunderbolt you can get that will be better than the thunderbolt you ordinarily have will have to come from this sage Dadichi. Now, not only will it have to come from the sage Dadichi, but it will have to come from his bones. You'll have to make a thunderbolt from his bones, because he's also been chanting the Narayana Kavacha mantra. And so his bones are as strong as whatever, stronger than steel. So use his bones. So you'll have to go to him and convince him to give up his bones. So here's this great sage. The demigods, including Indra, approach this great sage and say, our dear great sage, my dear great sage Dadichi, can I have your bones? I know if someone approached me with that particular request, I would call 911 immediately. So this great sage, he wasn't averse to giving his bones for a higher purpose, but he wanted to test the demigods. He actually made believe he was attached to his body. And he said, you know, this body is necessary to enjoy this world. And he wanted to hear Indra's preaching. Eventually, he admitted that he was just testing the demigods. And he said, all right, you can take my bones. Oh my God. So they took his bones and they fashioned a great thunderbolt in order to destroy this demon, Vritrasura. And Indra started to fight with this demon, Vritrasura, and Indra, interestingly enough, had a whole philosophical discussion, because this Vritrasura happened to be a great devotee. We're going to explain why and how he became a great devotee. So this Vritrasura was a great devotee, and Indra and he were talking back and forth about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and Indra was wondering, why is this Vritrasura preaching Krishna consciousness? He's acting like a demon, but he's speaking like a devotee. And even when Indra dropped the thunderbolt that he had made from the bones of Dadichi, Vritrasura said, pick it up again. Be heroic. Because he understood he wanted to be killed by Indra so he could go back to the spiritual world. So eventually Indra cut off one of his arms. There's another picture of Vritrasura from a different angle of vision. Indra cut off one of his arms, and then cut off the other arm, and Vritrasura, still enthusiastically fighting, this is also Utsahan Nishya Daryat, enthusiastically fighting, swallowed Indra. And so the demigods were upset. Indra's died at this particular point, but he hadn't died, because he had chanted that Narayana Kavacha mantra. See how powerful that is? So even though he was within the belly of this demon, the person who was acting as a demon, he still didn't die. While he was within the belly of Vritrasura, Vritrasura went into yogic trance because he wanted to meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in that yogic trance, he directly went back to Godhead. But the body was still there. So Indra, with the thunderbolt, was able to make his way out of the body, and in order to chop the head off of this personality, he took 360 days with this thunderbolt. That's how powerful this personality's head was. Of course, right after that, there was a problem, because this was the second great personality who he had offended or killed. He killed Visvarup first, offended his guru, killed Visvarup out of false pride, everything out of false pride, and killed this so-called demon. It wasn't a demon, Vritrasura. So what happened is that sin personified began to chase him. And the sin personified took the form of a very old lady who had tuberculosis and a fishy smell on her breath. Some of you may like fish. I like fish when they're swimming, not in the market. It's very horrible smell. Really mode of ignorance, eating fish. So this woman started to chase Indra all over the place. This personified sin. And here's another picture of her chasing Indra. And Indra took shelter in the stem of a lotus flower, because who resides in a lotus flower? Anyone know? Lakshmi. So Lakshmi was protecting Indra. So for 100 celestial years, Indra was residing in the stem of a lotus flower. And while he was residing in the stem of a lotus flower, there had to be someone else who took over his position in the heavenly planets. You know, like you have a president, vice president, etc. And so the person who took over was this king. He was a king previously, named Nahusha. We're going to talk about Nahusha in a second. Nahusha originally didn't want to take over. He thought, you know, why do I have to get into that management? I'm enjoying in the heavenly planets. So, you know what? Let someone else manage. But the demigod said to him, look, please take over, and if you take over, we will give you all of our combined potency, so no one can defeat you. So he thought, this is a good deal. Let me take over the heavenly planets. So he took over the heavenly planets, and again the same problem occurred that occurred with Indra. He became attached to his position. He identified himself with that position. In bhakti yoga, that's one of the problems that arise due to even the performance of religious activities. Because in the performance of religious activities, whether we're here in bhakti yoga or in Christianity or Judaism or any religion, one gets a position. People respect you. Then you identify with your position. First of all, we're not this body. I hate to tell you, I want to tell you, we're not this body. And therefore, everything that's connected with the body, we're not either. In other words, we're not white or black or American or Russian or anything like that. And we're not the president, vice president. We're not the chief minister. We're not the Pope, because I'm not the Pope. But we're not guru. But the problem is we tend to identify with these things. That's extended bodily consciousness. And absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Right? And especially you go to the heavenly planets, you get power over the whole universe. And wow, that's me. Especially if you get all the power given by the other demigods. And he was thinking like that, and then thinking like that, he made a big mistake. He looked over at Indra, who happened to be in the lotus flower, Indra's wife. And Indra happened to be in the lotus flower. He left his wife behind, didn't take his wife to the lotus flower. Maybe he should have done that. So anyway, so his wife, whose name was Sachi, he looked at her and said, she should be mine too. And he said, I am the new Indra. And he went to her and said, you should be mine too. She went to Brahaspati, the priest, and said, you got to protect me. And Brahaspati said, look, I have a plan. tell this Nahusha that you actually want to be with him. However, he has to come riding to see you in an appropriate vehicle. And what is that appropriate vehicle? It's a palanquin carried by the 7 great sages. Ooh. Because he understood that Nahusha would offend the 7 great sages, and it was a problem. So, what happened is she told that to Nahusha. Nahusha said, let's go for it. He went to the 7 sages, said to the 7 sages, okay, carry me now. And they picked up the palanquin. I mean, they were very obedient because, anyway, they were following the etiquette. They didn't object at that point, although they didn't like it. So they were carrying Nahusha, and somehow or other Nahusha wasn't really satisfied, with the carrying, and he kicked the sage Agastya Muni. And because he kicked the sage Agastya Muni, Agastya Muni cursed him, here, see a picture? To fall down to the earth planet and become a serpent. And when he was cursed to come down to the earth planet and become a serpent, he begged Agastya Muni, please, make some way that I can come back to the heavenly planets. And Agastya Muni said, yes, when you come in contact with Maharaj Yudhisthira, and Maharaj Yudhisthira discusses philosophy with you, then you go back to the heavenly planets. So what happened later on in the Mahabharata, that's not Maharaj Yudhisthira. Maharaj Yudhisthira is to the left, lower left. That's Nahusha captured Bhimsen. And Bhimsen was trying to fight with his strength, which he was also very proud of. And that's another lesson we're learning from this whole thing. Don't be proud of anything. Because whatever you have has just been lent to you by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whether it's intelligence, whether it's strength, whether it's bodily beauty, whatever. It all belongs to Krishna. And Krishna is a repository, unlimited repository of all those good qualities. Because whatever is there in the emanation must be there to an unlimited degree in the emanator. That's Krishna. So in other words, Krishna is the source of everything. Aham sarvasya prabhu matak sarvam pravartate. If you see something beautiful in this world, Krishna is unlimitedly more beautiful. See something or hear about something very powerful, Krishna is unlimitedly more powerful. You see an intelligent person, Krishna is unlimitedly more intelligent. See a famous person, Krishna is unlimitedly more famous. Even the atheists can't stop talking about Krishna. I was just mentioning this morning one famous atheist, and RD. Anyway, not going to tell you who it is. And he's just completely fixed on God. Wow, I'm impressed. If I could think about God as much as he's thinking about God, I'd be up there, in the spiritual world. But he's just, it's like Kamsa, the story of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Kamsa's thinking, when is Krishna coming? When is he coming? When is he coming? I'm not thinking like that. I'm thinking, when is Prasadam coming? When is Prasadam coming? When can I go to sleep? But Kamsa's thinking, Krishna, when is Krishna coming? When is he coming? When is he coming? I'm in anxiety. And the gopis are also thinking, an anxiety, but anyway. So what happened is Yudhisthira had a conversation with Nahusha, who became a snake. Nahusha went back to the heavenly planets by Yudhisthira Maharaj's mercy. So that's Indra. So I told you we were going to talk about Citraketu. We haven't gotten to Citraketu yet. So here we have, not Citraketu yet, but we have Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. And Parikshit Maharaj is hearing this whole story about Indra and Vritrasura, and he's thinking, why was this demon so Krishna conscious? What's the story? Please tell me the story about how this demon became so Krishna conscious. And Shukadeva Goswami very happily tells him the story. He says, once upon a time there was a king. Here he is. His name is Citraketu. And he was in charge of Surasena, actually in charge of the whole earth, but he lived in Surasena. Oops, what happened with there? Oh, There's a button. Anyway, doesn't matter. And he had a problem. He had a big problem because kings like to have children. Because there's this principle of primogeniture. Primogeniture means the oldest son usually takes over. You got to continue the dynasty, right? So he wanted to have a son. And he couldn't have a son. And he tried with a lot of wives. Here they are. 10 million of them. This isn't quite 10 million, but this you get an idea of 10 million wives. What's the population of the state of North Carolina? Anybody know? What? 8 million. That means more people than the whole state of North Carolina. No, more ladies. That's a lot of ladies. A lot of sorries. So he wanted, and none of the women could have children. A real big problem. Then, this great sage, Angira, came to him, and Angira said to him, what's the problem? And he explained, and Angira said, that's your karma. But then he kept insisting, I want to have a kid. Sometimes we have these desires, we're not just meant to have these things. Many things we want. We look at a car, like a Tesla, or this or that. You're just not meant to have it. It's not your karma. That's all right. Because you can be satisfied by the happiness within. We all want something outside. We want to become famous, like a famous author or something like that. So, famous author, famous sannyasi, whatever. And it's just not meant to be. But that's not where the happiness is. The happiness is really in the heart. Because you find people who are in very high positions in society and they're miserable. People who are extremely beautiful, famous, intelligent, and they're miserable. And you find people who are poor and they're happy. So that's really the point. The happiness is within, and Krishna talks about this in Bhagavad Gita. One should take his happiness from within. So, anyway, this Angira, he said, really, it's not meant to be. And Citraketu said, no, I got to have a son. And Angira said, okay, I'll bless you to have a son, and I'll give you some nice sweet rice to give to your wife. The wife that he chose her name was Citraketu. I'll give you some nice sweet rice to give to your wife, and then she will have a son, and the son will be Harsha-shoka. That should be his name. Harsha-shoka means happiness and distress. So Citraketu was thinking, yeah, all children are like that. Sometimes they cry, sometimes they smile. Happiness and distress, isn't it? All children do that. Sometimes they have to take them to the hospital, distress. Sometimes he didn't understand what was going to happen. So he has this nice, look at all the ladies there. So he has this nice son by one of the wives. Because remember, there was 10 million, so 9,999,999 other wives. And they were not happy campers. Because you have a kid, all the attention goes to the kid. And so he was paying all attention to the child, all attention to the wife, Citraketu, who had the child, and the other wives couldn't stand it, so they made a plan. They poisoned the kid. The kid died, and of course Citraketu was lamenting, and people were lamenting, crying. Even the wives who had poisoned, they were crying too. I guess called crocodile tears, to make them believe they were sad. And what happened is then Angira came back with Narada Muni. I don't know what happened here with this thing in the middle. There we go. With Narada Muni. And they began to preach to the king. Then they said, this is material world. Well, there's something happening here. Anyway, material world is temporary, and you shouldn't get attached to these things. So they preached, and then just to make their point even more clear, Narada Muni said some mantra and brought the child back to life. And the child, Harsashoka, basically acted very, very detached. He said, everything is temporary. I don't even recognize you as my parents anymore. We've had so many parents. And he described the time factor. As this time moves on, everything changes. The material energy is constantly in flux. There's one Greek philosopher who said you can't step into the same river twice because the river is always flowing. And even with this body, the body is always changing. Material nature is always changing. So there's no constancy in this world. Just like sometimes I go on Facebook and I look at a picture of myself 20 years ago. I said, what happened to that young man? He's gone. So anyway, so they described the time factor, and Citraketu became so detached from hearing this philosophy. Krishna had arranged this instant detachment, that what did he do? He started to chant. He was given another mantra, by Narada Muni, that if you chant this mantra in 7 days, you will see God. So for 7 days, he chanted this mantra. Wow. And he fasted. He drank some water. He fasted for 7 days, chanted the mantra, and he saw Balaram. That's Balaram there. He saw Balaram, got Balaram's darshan, and Balaram gave him service. Go on Sankirtan. So he went to joined the Vidyadharas. Vidyadhara is like a heavenly planet, sort of like an in-between heavenly planet. And he went and started traveling and preaching Krishna consciousness and chanting the Lord's holy names. And he had a whole group of ladies in which he chanted with. And they were flying around. And as they were flying around, one day, they happened to fly over where Lord Shiva was preaching to great sages. And Lord Shiva was seated with his wife, Parvati. And not only was he seated with her, he had her on his lap, he was embracing her, and he was giving Bhagavatam class. Now, if that were to happen in any of our temples, because I'm a sannyasi, but let's say if one of the householders here was giving Bhagavatam class with his wife on his lap embracing him, it would be highly unusual. But in the case of Lord Shiva is a direct expansion of Krishna. Not Vishnu Tava, but in a special category of his own. And his wife is material energy personified, and whatever they do is service to Krishna. When Lord Shiva consorts with his wife, that's the implantation of all the living entities within the material world. Do you understand? Saikshita. It's described that Lord Vishnu, at the time of the creation, looks at the material energy, and through his glance, which is known as Shambhu or Shiva, we enter into the womb of the material nature. So this is not an ordinary man, woman together. But Citraketu, understanding that, and also having a very friendly relationship with Lord Shiva, started to tease Lord Shiva. How is this possible? You're preaching to all these renowned sages, embracing your wife. And Lord Shiva, he didn't get bothered by this. He thought, this is my friend Citraketu. We're making some friendly jokes with each other. But Parvati did not appreciate it. Parvati cursed him. She said, you should become a demon. You're acting like a demon. Here's Parvati cursing him. You're acting and speaking like a demon, not understanding who we are. So you should become a demon. And so he was so powerful, according to Lord Shiva, because he was a pure devotee of the Lord, he was capable of counter-cursing her. That's how powerful a devotee is. But a devotee doesn't do that. So instead, he got off of his airplane, bowed down, said, "Mother, I accept your curse." And she was so astounded, impressed, that Lord Shiva had to explain the position of a great Vaishnava. Here's someone not attached to position in the material world, not attached to prestige. I mean, he had a very high position as the king of the Vijayadaras, flying around in his airplane, doing Sankirtan, being a pure devotee of the Lord. That's the highest position you can have. And he was so detached that he was willing to accept the curse of Parvati and become a demon. And Lord Shiva explained the position of a pure devotee to Parvati. And his famous verse, Narayana Parak Sarve Nakutashkana Bibyati Swargapa Varga Narakeshu Abitu Yartha Darshana. That a devotee of God, he can go to heaven, he can go to hell, he can go back to Godhead. Apitul Yartha Darshana. He sees all these different places exactly the same. Because he is serving. He's a servant. And wherever he goes, he's doing this same thing. Prabhupada gave this example. This is an Indian example. He was talking about a wheat threshing machine. In other words, a machine that threshes wheat. Those of you who aren't farmers, you'll just have to accept a wheat threshing machine. All right, let's take a car instead of wheat. Let's take a more modern example. Anyway, so Prabhupada said, a wheat threshing machine, wherever you put it, all it does is thresh wheat. It doesn't chant Hare Krishna. So a car drives. It's, you send a car to heaven. Well, of course, you couldn't send a car to heaven. There was actually someone who sent a car into outer space, but that's another story. I know, don't mention the name. We don't get paid for advertisements. So wherever you go, wherever this machine goes, it does the same thing. So wherever a devotee goes, he serves Krishna. So he's not worried about going to hell, right? And so his becoming a demon was a service to Krishna. Because he was helping rectify Indra. He was preaching Krishna consciousness in a difficult circumstance. So sometimes people get worried. Sometimes we get approached and asked, aren't you afraid of going to hell? And the response is, no. We can do the same thing there. The preaching would be pretty good. You don't have to convince people the material world is suffering. Half of your preaching is already done for you, right? Chant Hare Krishna. All right. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Where if you go to Hawaii or someplace like chant Hare Krishna, no, it's so nice here. So Citraketu basically was thinking, I'm willing to accept wherever the Lord sends me. And that's the end of the slideshow. And so this is the position of a pure devotee. So you contrast him, of course, with Indra. It's quite different. So the demigods are generally sa-kama devotees. So sa-kama devotees have that tendency to become attached to things in this world and end up in trouble from time to time. Of course, all of us, we have some desires within this world to fulfill, but we should focus on the point of becoming nishkam devotees. That's free from desires, so we simply desire to please Krishna. Nyavilashatashunyam jnana karma navatam anukulyena krishnanushilanam bhakti-utamam. And that gives the greatest happiness. If you want to be happy, Kevalananda Kanda, Bhaja Bhaja Bhai, Chaitanya Nitai. If you want to be unlimitedly happy, only happy, that's the method. And if you want to experience Sukha Dukkha, Chapala Sukha, flickering happiness, that's your choice. So, that's the story of Citraketu. So anyone have any quick questions or comments? Interesting story, yeah.
My question is that, so, was it a progression of offenses? Like, first he he committed an offense by negligence.
Indra, yeah.
And then after that, then he committed another offense.
Cutting off the heads of this
Yeah.
group.
Cutting off Vishnu's head, which was more serious. And then he commits another offense.
Well, he was actually asked to, the interesting thing, he was asked to kill this demon Vritrasura
Right.
by Vishnu. But it was an offense still.
So is everything like, is the lesson for us that in our life things can start out, we can start really subtly with offenses, like ignoring or in our mind, and then that'll lead us to a bigger offense?
Yeah, pride leads to the fall. We should consider ourselves, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Trinadapi Sunichena Tarodivasihishana Manina Manadena Kirtiniya Siddhari. We should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, ready to offer all respects to everyone else, not thinking ourselves any better than anyone. Because you can offend any living entity. We're not just talking about offending a devotee, offending a religious person. You can offend an ant if you don't properly respect an ant, because they're all living entities. So that's why, one reason why we don't eat animals, and that's why we offer food, boga, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because we're respecting that living entity by offering it to God, saying that we have to take, sometimes you have to take the life of a plant in order to eat the plant, or part of the plant. We're respecting that living entity. We respect you and we're offering you to God, we're taking you, and in this way, you're going to make spiritual advancement. The plant or the soul within the plant is going to make spiritual advancement. So the humility, abject humility is required. Like you see in Christianity, you have Lord Jesus Christ, he washed the feet of his followers, his disciples. And that's humility. But unfortunately, you know, we're very proud of whatever we have. As they say, a pauper is even proud of his penny. So let's just understand everything comes from God. We're meant to respect every living entity as part and parcel of God, our brother and sister. In that way we can avoid all offenses. Yeah. Yes, Ricardo.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I was just, so yeah, I was thinking about what you were saying about, you know, position. We see a lot of people that get like a big position and they do really, really well. But then, like, you know, let's say they get mental illness or whatever, I mean, that's it. They're just devastated and it's over. I mean, it can be very, very quick.
Yes. Let's say a sports star, forget about mental illness right now, but let's say a sports star who loses his physical ability. You know, it's like, what do they say, like Casey struck out? You know, what is that? There's no more, what is that song? There's no more joy in what's Phil, because Casey is struck. Anyway, none of you would know what I'm talking about. That's from the old days. So, basically, people get upset. You know, you lose your ability, whether it's mental ability or physical ability. Good point. Yes? Krishna giveth and Krishna taketh.
Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you. That was a very interesting story with all the nuances of this and that. But, you know, explain to us why Indra had to suffer for doing what Lord Vishnu told him to do. You know, he told him to kill the Trasa.
Yes, but his attitude wasn't correct. You know, if you had to do that, he should have begged forgiveness for having to do that with Citraketu. I mean, there should have been some attitude difference like that, and therefore he had to suffer. Sometimes you have to do something, but the motivation has to be correct. I mean, it's just like when you're serving God, You can do it ritualistically, in which case it's actually a deviation from spiritual life. We have this term called niyam agraha. That means doing something without the right intention. And that actually is a deviation. So one's heart and mind have to be focused in the right direction in spiritual life. Okay, I think, Rishikesh, that's the last question.
No, when Indradev was, when he killed his first,
Visvarup,
Vishwarup.
the three-headed guy.
Right. So why he had to share his intellect with water and ladies and everything? I don't understand that concept. Why someone has to suffer because he is sin?
Well, he made he made a deal. You know, you got to take some good stuff, you got to take some bad stuff. You know, sometimes it's like that. You want to take some of my debt, you can have my car too. So it's something, I could get into detail with the water and the trees and everything like that, but it was like they got a plus from it too. It wasn't only, dumping my sin off on you, person, but you get something for it. Take my debt, here's my car. Something like that. It was a mixed deal. That's it. Anyway, I'll tell you later all the different details. Something I didn't really wanted to get into at this point. Yes? Question? No? Yeah. It's an interesting story.
Maybe my question is not at the point, but I just have been wondering why men want to get rid of suffering. Like, I know it sounds not so humble to say men's suffering is so different from animal suffering, but sometimes we just take privilege and we are proud of suffering. So I don't know how to...
Why do we want to get rid of suffering?
Yes. I know it's very reasonable for a man to say, I want to attain happiness.
Yeah.
But it can sound ridiculous for a man to say, I want to get rid of suffering. But maybe I think under consciousness, a man, he can entertain suffering because it can manifest that he is a man, is a human.
Yeah. Actually, sometimes suffering, which we call in Sanskrit tapasya, voluntary suffering, is useful in order to make spiritual advancement. But too much suffering, there's a modicum or a medium of suffering which may be useful that one accepts as an austerity, but not that you give yourself voluntarily suffering, but in the performance of your activities, which is called austerity, you may have to accept certain things. And that's true. I think that's what you're referring to. In the performance of duty, yes, we all have to accept something. I mean, for example, in my life, I get up early every morning. That's an austerity. I wouldn't say it's suffering, but it's an austerity. Because naturally, people want to, what? Sleep late. You want to hit the alarm clock, the snooze button. And so, I wouldn't say suffering, but it's an austerity. It's an austerity. Let's use a different word for the suffering right now, austerity or tapasya. And then it's useful as far as learning about this world. Or another austerity I did many years ago, I'm not recommending this for any of you, is we used to take cold showers every day because there was no hot water. But and that helped me understand the nature of this world by doing. I'm not saying don't take that as an instruction, but and so it helped train up the mind. What you're saying is actually true. It helped train up the mind. I'll give you a practical example. Just like recently, I was at Govardhan, and my water heater didn't work. So devotees were saying, "Oh, we can heat up water in pots and bring it to your room." I said, "No, I'll take a shower." And I took a cold shower, and I didn't engage in extraneous activity. in order to do something that, first of all, wasn't going to hurt me. It was just a little austerity. So what you're saying is true. A little austerity, when you need to take it, don't invent austerity. Don't sleep on a bed of nails. But don't be like that princess and the pea. You know the story of the princess and the pea? There's a story we have in America, the princess and the pea, that there was one little pea under her mattress, and they had to keep piling up. How many mattresses did they pull up? A lot of mattresses, and she still was sore. So just accept what naturally comes and don't engage in what's called over-endeavor to try. We can have a little bit of endeavor to try to mitigate our suffering. A little bit. But over-endeavor means that we lose sight of the ultimate purpose of life, and we spend all of our time trying to mitigate that particular suffering. So zamodakam, I mean, there's a certain amount we can endeavor to try to eliminate physical suffering. Ultimately, the solution, Babosharat Shrotra Mano Biramat, Ko Uttama Shloka Gurnanavada, is to hear and chant about Krishna. And then, Nivritta Tarshar Upagiyamana. And then the actual suffering will not seem like suffering anymore. It's just your consciousness will be so high, just like if you go up in an airplane, what's on the ground becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. I know I'm not going to give that example today. Maybe I should. Okay, I'll give the example. Because she's heard it before, she wants me to say that. When I was young, I flew an airplane. And sometimes my mother got very angry with me. And so when we went up in the airplane, my mother shrunk. She got smaller and smaller, and it was inconsequential. Just seeing a little dot with her hand raised, you know, was not at all threatening anymore. So it's like that when you okay, that's the example. So when you elevate your Krishna consciousness to that extent, then really, yes, the body may be undergoing this austerity, that austerity, whatever, but it's inconsequential. It doesn't disturb your mind anymore. Your mind is fixed. And that's actually the purpose of yoga. Like Patanjali mentions in the Yoga Sutras, one of the main purposes of yoga is stop the vritti, or the turning of the mind. Just like of course you've all heard this example before. In English we have words like that too. Invert, subvert, pervert, revert. And so the mind is always turning, so when you can focus the mind, Vyavasayatmaka buddhir eke ha kuranandana. When you fix the mind, then the mind can be controlled, and then you can deal with almost any sort of suffering or problem in this world. Thank you for asking the question. Fantastic question. Okay, so I think it's time to end, because now it's time for prasadam, right?
Prasadam time. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for listening. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai.